So as folks are connecting to audio, if you want to chime in on the chat and let us know who you are and who you're with today, that would be really helpful. So we can start getting a collection of industries and names from the region to know who's participating in our talk today. I recognize several of you, but I also see a lot of new faces too, which is really cool. Actually, let me see here. We'll give everybody another minute or two to come in. Oh, goody. Okay. Sherry's here from E Street Gallery. So we have someone else in the visual arts. That's pretty cool. I see Charlie Cooper, Sarah's vice president. He has the good Sarah background. I need to get a good Sarah background, Charlie. You look very professional. Oh, good. We have representation from the Crocker here today. That's good. Good, good, good. Michelle, also from the Sarah board. I see Brooke from the Sarah board. Sweet. All righty. Oh, goody. All right. And now Julia's here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Liv Moe, and I am the board president of the Sacramento Alliance for Regional Art. I'm also the founding director of Verge Center for the Arts, which is a contemporary art center and artist residency in Midtown Sacramento. Sorry, I'm still letting people in. And I'm really excited that we have the Office of Arts and Culture here today. We also have some friends from Sierra Health Foundation who are going to help us navigate through a really, really difficult time that we're all facing. I think many of us thought we would be doing something much different right now than confronting new health challenges. So the Office of Arts and Culture with Megan Van Voorhis and Don Pitts have offered to facilitate the conversation today, which I'm really excited about. And after them, we'll be joined by Laura Jackson, the program officer and contact tracer for the Sierra Health Foundation, and also Richard Dana, who is the director of economic development for the center at Sierra Health Foundation. And they have a bunch of really wonderful resources to share with us today. And then one last quick pitch, and I'll put it in the chat. If you're not already a member of the Sacramento Alliance for Regional Art, it's free, and you can become a member both as an individual or an institution. So if you go to artsforsac.org, you can find more information. Actually, Michael Stevenson's here today, also a board member, and learn how you can stay connected with us. This is actually the second convening we've done this week. We did a training on arts education in schools yesterday morning. That was really great too. So with all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan and Don.
Thanks, Liv, and kudos to Sarah for bringing folks together around the topic. I think it's really important. I will share briefly. Hi, everyone. If I haven't seen you recently, or if I haven't seen you in person yet, I'm dying to. Don and I met actually just last year when we were working together on a project called Reopen Every Venue Safely. And Cleveland, when I was in Cleveland, was a pilot site for that work. And of course, we were at a very different stage of the pandemic at that point, right? We were working with a lot of independent venues, and we're just trying to sort of figure out like what could happen as we're figuring out, how do we work? So, this is where I built some really great connections with some folks in the live music community in Cleveland that were like coming together weekly, where we were really talking through some of these issues and looking at, how do you, what are your policies in green rooms for social distancing? How are you dealing with people on stage? How are you getting people in, queuing them up, getting them out? What are you doing? Are you bringing your mic? You're encouraging someone to bring their mic as opposed to, you relying on that. So it was fascinating when I think back, we put together a document in the way back, and Don and I were talking about this, because he also did it in Austin with some groups down there, and kind of looking how situation has changed so much over that time. So, really that's actually what brought Don and I together. And then it was like, kismet, right? When I was asked to participate in that work and bring some of that to Sacramento. And so brought Don on to kind of assist. So our objective actually with you and with Sarah organizing is really to try to get a sense of where we are right now, and to really open this up as a dialogue for you all to share with each other and with us. What are you seeing? Like, what are you facing right now relative to some of these issues? And so the conversation that we really want to have with you is around three big things, actually, that we think are pretty important. One of them is vaccine policies. So we know that there haven't been a lot of real guidelines coming down in terms for employers, but independently, people are coming up with decisions about how they're going to deal with that. So we want to talk a little bit about that, how people are looking at that, what they're experiencing with it. So for those of you who have, how's it going? What are you doing with your volunteers, with your staff? How are people reacting? And maybe what do you need in terms of support and et cetera. So vaccine policy is one of those things we're going to talk about. We also want to talk about enforcement, because what happens if people don't is a big question. And you're on site for performance, or people are there. How's that going for those of you who are open, and what are you seeing and what do you need? So we're going to go through that with a couple of questions, and then lastly look at communications. I shared with Liv and Michelle a couple of days ago, actually, that there's a campaign, Bay Area Arts Together. They're working on a strategy for communications and bringing solidarity to how they're approaching these issues, and then communicating what people need to expect. So we thought we'd bring that and elevate that with you, and just say, what do you need? Do we need shared messaging that we're all using so that it's consistent? Do you need, how could the media be helpful? We do have some relationships with, community news outlets that maybe we might be able to leverage or whatnot. So those are the big things that we were thinking about in the general discussion to kind of get underway. And I am going to lean to a couple of you just to get us started, because some of you I know are operational and doing things and experiencing things already. So let's start. I want to just jump right into it. Unless there's anything you want to say. So hi, y'all.
Hi, y'all. Or is it howdy? I can't remember.
I don't know. It's whatever it is down south in Austin. Okay, so we'll jump right in. Don's going to be taking some notes, and then we're going to kind of confer and feed that back. So provide a little bit of support here to Sarah on the back end. So here we are, vaccination policies. We're seeing those increase. We're seeing things in other, airlines, et cetera, what they're doing, how they're looking at it. I kind of want to just start with a couple of folks. Julia, do you mind if I lean to you first? Because you guys definitely came out and said, hey, we're doing this, and this is what it's going to be. So what are you doing on the vaccine policy front? How's it going?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Julia. I'm with Harlow's in Midtown. And a few weeks ago, I guess it's been about 3 weeks since we announced our policy, and we're requiring proof of full vaccination for anyone who enters our building. So that's patrons, staff, and artists. And we weren't the very first venue in town to announce that, but we were the largest. And within a couple of days, it was really nice to see a couple other ones jump on board with the same policy. We definitely put a target on our back and had lots of angry people coming at us, but we also had a lot of support. So, it just came down to, we felt that this was the only way that we could operate in a safe capacity. Of course, we're enforcing masks indoors as well, which we've had 3 shows so far. And the crowds have been very compliant and very willing to work with our policy, we've found, which is good. We were kind of nervous at first about that. But yeah, I wish that we weren't the ones having to make the decision of whether or not to require vaccines. I wish that decision were coming from someone higher up, the city, the county, whoever. But like I said, we felt that it was the only way that we could operate safely. I've been having conversations with other venue operators across the country and across the state, and there are different combinations of rapid tests that people are requiring. And those just aren't really, rapid tests for everyone who walks in our doors just isn't really financially an option for us. If it were, we would absolutely be doing that as well. But yeah, it's been working out well too. So
Julia, we talk about, or we're thinking about not performers, but audiences when they come in and sort of expectations there. But on the staff side, on the performer side? I mean, I know we've seen some pretty big players out there, musicians who said, no, we're not going to get vaccinated, and that's kind of challenging. But have you seen or experienced any trouble with either working with promoters or separately in terms of that? Have you had to turn anybody away?
We've canceled some shows because the artists refuse to comply with our guidelines. We've even had a couple artists who have advocated against guidelines and asked that we loosen up our restrictions. And we basically said, no, and you probably won't play at our venue again. But yeah, so, I mean, for the most part, the artists are on board. And it's encouraging to see that artists are making their whole tours be vaccination only tours. And that's becoming more and more common, which is encouraging. I think that the mindset that we all need to be on the same page about this to encourage people to get vaccinated is growing. And it's just kind of, I think the mindset is if we take away the fun things for the non-vaccinated people, maybe they'll decide to get vaccinated. And I understand, of course, that some people cannot, and that doesn't apply to them. But I think that once more of us get on the same page, that's when the numbers are really going to start changing.
Are there, from your vantage point, are there any areas where you feel like, okay, as a sector here in Sacramento, that we should really have some solidarity around, like specific, like, what do you think? I mean, I know you guys took a hard line and you seems to be working all right, but solidarity around vaccine, like, hey, everybody, if you're performing, if you're coming, if you're staff, you're vaccinated.
Yeah, I think so. I wish that it was required to do most things indoors. Of course, you can still transmit the disease and everything, but yeah, I wish,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
We're very
Cool.
pro full vaccination. The tests are great as well and important, but the financial aspect is, challenging.
Yeah, that sounds great. Is there anybody else who's like maybe open or newer open or has a different experience with this? Either, what are you doing? There's some folks that I don't know on the group, so I'm afraid to call out anybody else. I want to give somebody else an opportunity to chime in. Michael, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Michael Stevenson. I'm the artistic director at Capitol Stage, and we've actually had two audiences now. And we had really interesting and evolving sort of vaccine stance. We started with you had to be vaccinated, but we were also willing to provide a test if people forgot or had special medical or philosophical exemptions. But as we kept going, we just felt like that's not enough, and we didn't want to be in the test business. But also the accuracy of the test dispensed on the spot was a question. And as I see the SF and the New York mandates came out, we changed ours just recently, a couple of days ago, to vaccination proof required. There's no other way around it. Now, we did plan the season. It's a one-man show, so that made a lot of our choices a lot easier backstage. Everybody's masked backstage. The audience is masked. The audience obviously is vaccinated. And so the first day I started thinking about it, we got contacted by a woman who was very ill with cancer and wanted to know if she could come and see the show, but she couldn't be vaccinated because of her condition. So it was like the first day. I know, I was like, but I realized it's the weight of all these people coming across your door, and we have to do everything we possibly can to keep them healthy. And there's just too many variables. And especially now with the Delta variant all over the place, that has changed the game. About 4 weeks ago, I thought, this is perfect. We're in really great shape. And then that eroded into we're almost back where we were, except with a bunch of vaccinated people in the room. There's a much different disease vector and much different outcomes. So, so far, no complaints, many emails of support and many people saying thank you for opening the theater. Interestingly, we had a lot of older people last night who I thought would be some of the last to return, but it turned out to be the reverse. So far, so good. We haven't had big houses yet, which are coming later in the week. It's been a challenge for our staff. We've had to change the way we get in the theater, having people checking vaccine cards, having people pulling tickets. We also have posters with the electronic vaccine on the outside on the theater. So if people forget, they can use their phone and we can guide them to that site. And we do accept that, California State Gov proof of vaccination. So far, so good. We had about 10 no-shows last night, and I feel like that's Delta. We do have no-shows very often, but I feel like there's going to be a lot of that, and to normalize going out again is going to take a long time. It's going to take, a year or two at least, I think.
Yeah, Michael, with vaccine verification, how are you doing it? I know at one point Liz and I, when she first introduced, like, hey, should we bring folks together, talk about this? Absolutely. How we were going to do it. And I know that, you can go up to the website, but I'll be honest, like, I had an experience. I did a vaccine clinic at Pinnell. And so when I went to use the site and just, try to put my information in, it didn't immediately come. And it suggested that it was going to be like a multi-week process for them to be able to verify from there. So I think that's, while at first I was like, oh, great, this is the answer for folks. Then I had my own experience and said, okay, maybe this isn't the answer for folks. So what is the solution? So are you just using vaccine cards, or how are you doing it?
We're accepting vaccine cards, photos of the vaccine card, or the CA State Gov is a backup. We don't use that as a primary way, but if it does work for people, we do allow that. The other thing we did is, this is a co-pro with SF Playhouse, and they did a really great 3-camera video of the show that was done when we got here. So we actually had that option to offer people. We did turn away a couple last night because they didn't have their documents, but we are going to reschedule them. Having that video in the back pocket is pretty good, though, because there are also some people who just went straight to the site and bought the video and are just too afraid to come back. So there's an individual person assigned to checking the CDC cards and figuring out what the date is that day, and then just checking those while somebody else gets the ticket. And they also have to produce a photo ID with that as well that has to match. So we have one person dedicated to matching the photo ID and checking the CDC card, and then a separate person is doing tickets. And then once you're inside, it's old business as usual.
Mm-hmm. Don, I'm just gonna jump over to you. I know you're taking notes, but does that raise any questions for you?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that, but I do have a question on your staffing or checking. Are you just utilizing your standard operational staff, or you had to hire additional staff?
We've had to hire additional staff, and we also moved the box office outside in front of the building to reduce the risk of exposure. And we've got some stanchions. We're still working on getting people to go. Their natural inclination is go to the box office door, and they have to line up down the street now. But we moved everything we can outside, and if you get a concession, you have to consume it outside before the show starts on our patio. So we're just trying to minimize the risk in any way we can. But yeah, we definitely have had to add staff. Definitely. Like, good. There is a document from Equity that's called, it's a safety plan that requires COVID safety managers. And that is just a huge position all by itself. Our production manager took that on. She created some Google Forms for those 4 questions that you're always asked, and sends them out every day to the people in the vaccinated company. But it's big. You got to make a lot of calls. You got to coordinate a lot of stuff and observe a lot of stuff. And we thought we could share these duties, which we have, but it's a lot. We're gonna have to hire somebody for that position as well.
Mm-hmm. Julia, can we lean back to you, because how's that going on your side of things? Did you have to hire people specifically to do it, and how are you verifying?
So similar to what Michael was saying, we're checking vaccine cards, photos of vaccine cards, and the California State website. And we did move most of we kind of have a 3-phase check-in. So the first phase is checking the cards and cross-checking with an ID, and then it's checking the ID and scanning that and making sure that's legit. And then it's scanning tickets or whatever. And we moved the first 2 steps outside. The actual scanning of the tickets is still inside because we need access to our computer for that. But we're doing as many things as we can to kind of minimize points of contact. We have not had to hire any additional staff. But we have done some shifting around. We always have a certain number of security guards on site. So we'll have whoever was originally going to be on the back patio out front in the beginning. So they're one of those 3 steps in the process. And then we shift them back outside after we're done scanning in. So. And
just out of curiosity, are you allowing merch sales?
We are.
That's usually, an area where people congregate at the end of the night.
We are. I mean, that's one of the bottlenecks. We've only had 3 shows so far, and there was only one that was a heavy merch show. But we did have our staff kind of mitigating and creating space between the people waiting in line. And then again, reminding to keep masks on. But like I said, we haven't really had any problems with people, you know, wanting to have their masks off. We've had pretty respectful audiences. So, and then also I think Michael mentioned something about no shows, and across the board, kind of the people that I've been talking to, we've seen about 30% no show rate at most of our shows, which is very high. We usually see about 5, I think. But at our venue and the other venue operators that I talk to, it's pretty much across the board 30%, which is rough. So
one other question for you, and then I've got one for Charlie, because he's got his hand up over there, and I'm eager to kind of hear from him. But how's the alcohol environment going? I mean, you think about, right, you're selling that, and then inhibitions get lowered, and you know, have you experienced anything becoming challenging a little bit later in the night as far as continued mask wearing, et cetera?
Honestly, no. I mean, we had a punk show the other night, and people would be holding their beers, take their mask off, take a sip, put the mask back on, and just keep watching the show. And it's, yeah, people have been really responsible about it. It's been really great. So, and that's what we were obviously concerned about. You know, you get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 drinks in and you get looser. But so far, so good, knock on wood.
That's great. Hey, Charlie, since you've got your hand up there.
I do. I have just a question, Megan, for a follow-up question with Michael and Julia, and that is with seating. Have you are you seating them differently, 6 feet apart from one another? How are you doing your seating?
So we're just doing regular seating. So far, we've had lower crowds, so it's not a big deal, but people have sat next to strangers so far. That's been a surprise to me, actually, how well that's gone. I fully expect at some point somebody's going to get up in the middle of the show and walk out just because, you know, the fear is built up. But we also have the air conditioning running all the time, and there's major league ventilation happening. So I think that with the mask and the vaccine card has led to a better result than I would have thought.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we've only had 1 seated show so far. Our other shows are standing room. But I mean, there were a few people who they expressed discomfort when we were going to seat them next to someone else they didn't know. And so we put them in another space where they felt more comfortable. And yeah, making sure the AC is on to the point where you can feel the air moving.
There was a question in the chat, and I think it's a really good one because we've been talking a lot. Some of this is, you know, older populations and et cetera, and younger adult populations. But a good question in the chat from Sarah: what are venues doing for performances or programs geared toward youth, knowing that it's an age group that can't be vaccinated right now? Liv, you've got your hand up. I don't know, because you were doing some educational programming, I think, but not performances necessarily. So if anybody's got anything on that front. Yeah.
Actually, I mean, I was gonna ask a different question, but yeah, we managed to get our youth programs in right in the tiny window that things were feeling a little more safe this summer. They concluded just as mandates and things started coming back. Unfortunately, we have a show coming up in September that is really heavily focused on children's art and had a lot of sensory experiences and things that would have involved kids being on site, and we're going to have to make them all virtual. So we've basically just decided to really dial back the kids stuff until we have a better sense of what's going on, because we're just too worried about the risk in terms of having them on site. And then actually I was going to ask, Laura brought something up that I've thought about before, and I'm not sure, I don't think Richard Lewis from Broadway was able to join us, but with anybody that has a ticketing system, if there's a way that you could have your vaccine results on file so that whenever you register for a ticket in the future, you don't have to do that over again every time you're checking in.
So I just make a note about that only because I have a husband who works in electronic medical records and HIPAA and dealing with information exchange. And I would be curious, folks from Sierra Health, just to noodle that. whether or not you guys know about anything, whether that's really allowable, because the moment you start taking people's healthcare information, you know, what is the responsibility in terms of managing that, I think is a big question. So you don't have to respond now, but certainly be interested in your thoughts on that. Yeah, Michelle.
I was just going to say, and then are we, you know, it's going to be interesting to see once a year goes by, you know, we have to be revaccinated. Are we then going to have to show the new card, and then, you know, everybody's going to have to be revaccinated? It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And as far as the youth, I was looking at Broadway Sacramento's e-blast that they sent out, and they are doing, which I think a lot of other organizations may not be able to do if kids are in the shows and they have audiences, is having the children who cannot be vaccinated because they're younger age, having them show that negative test. Like, if for those people that may have traveled, like certain states like Hawaii require that, it's going to be like getting ready to go to Hawaii, going to those shows. They're going to have to get their kids vaccinated, or I'm sorry, tested 3 days before the show. I didn't get to read the whole e-blast, but I know that that was part of it. I don't know that we'll be able to do that for those of us that are doing youth shows, that we're going to be able to require that. I know that we're looking at doing shows outside in the early fall, just to try to, you know, and looking at more fall, spring to try to keep shows outside. Just looking at different ways of making it safe.
Yeah, and then sounds like the financial resources on that testing side, definitely making note of those needs, you know, for some of this stuff and staffing and so forth. It's really helpful. It looks like there's another question in the chat, which is also a good one. Hold on, slowly here. What about negative COVID tests within 72 hours? Will those be acceptable instead of a vaccine card? Airports accept those to travel abroad. What do you think? It sounded like it was more a function of, well, yeah, actually, it's
Laura,
that's not a function of resources.
Laura or Richard, is there a standard for that, for the time frame?
Laura, I'll let you jump in right after me. So yeah, you know what? I appreciate that question. Right now, the standard that we've come across, we've seen most folks using is 72 hours. So that's assuming they're not using a rapid response test, which I know there is some concern around it always being accurate, but we have found that we've used it, for example, with some of our youth basketball tournaments and some of our youth pop-up programs where they've done rapid testing to make sure that coming in the door, folks are at least in a good space. These are free tests that which we were going to mention. Sierra Health Foundation is really part of a large collaborative, 13 different testing sites, and they have mobile units, so they can go to locations to be able to support what we're talking about, you're all talking about here today. And it's free. So it doesn't cost all of you anything to have them. You just have to have the location and the ability for them to set up. And of course, it's a matter of scheduling for them, right? You can imagine today their time is more stretched than it was. I think was it Michael who said, like, felt good 4 weeks ago? 4 weeks ago, their time wasn't as stretched. They're going through more tests a week now than they did back in November last year. So you can imagine that it's pretty stretched then. So 72 hours, though, to answer that question, is the standard that folks are using. And again, folks do use rapid testing now at door sites. So
That's great. That's really helpful. Great questions, folks. It didn't sound like, I'm just going to be a little bit sensitive to time here, the enforcement of some of these policies that folks were necessarily having a ton of trouble with, but I also want to just kind of go back and make sure. So some of you were open, or some of you worried about that. Just any things that you're thinking about, concerns on enforcement of some of these policies, and I know what the effect is potentially. Has anybody had anybody walk away and say, I'm never coming back? Liv, I saw you on
Yeah,
mute.
we had somebody do that over a mask. Actually, two couples did that over masks. We had our first event back to the masking, which was the first weekend of August. And there were two separate couples over the course of the night that walked up and saw other people in the parking lot wearing masks and refused to come in, which fine. And then in a couple weeks, we're going to have our first vaccine required event, and we'll see how that goes. But we're going to actually have a security guard there, not necessarily because we think things are going to get out of control or whatever, but just to have somebody so that if someone is really being crappy about it, that we have somebody who can help us out, because our staff is not really equipped to enforce things with angry customers over stuff like this. So, and it's usually, I have no idea what the attendance will be like given current circumstances, but typically our event, the event that we're going to require vaccines for, can get upwards of 500 attendees over the course of the event. So it serves a lot more people than our normal programming. So there's a higher risk of, having somebody show up who's going to be lame. So.
And it's a good point. Just the pressure on the staff for having that kind of responsibility, and some people maybe not being prepared to handle confrontation that might arise in the event. Like, how are you all feeling about that? What would be helpful? Are there any tools that you guys have, or do you
Can
need
I
some?
unmute? This is Justina from Verge.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to chime in and just say I talked to our security that's gonna work that event last night, and their guards are actually trained to check vaccine cards, and they've been doing it for other events. So I think that they should be able to handle like anything that comes up because they've had special training. It's
definitely been
members
a
in
worry of ours.
black too.
That's great.
It's
Thanks,
definitely been a
Justina.
worry of ours. And we don't really have an answer right now. So far, we haven't had anything, but it would be incredibly helpful, which is political hot potato. A citywide mandate or a county mandate would be really great. It would that would, I think, take the teeth out of a lot of people who just feel like they're being discriminated against because, oh, my venue's doing it, but your venue's not. That would be really amazing.
And I think that probably has to come from the county because it's a public health issue rather than the city in terms of that. So yeah, but I do have I'll share a little bit, having good conversations with the county, and I think they are very interested in talking with you all about how it's going and how they can be more helpful. So John.
Hi, thank you, Megan. I want to go back to the question you asked a moment ago about if somebody shows up at the door and doesn't have proof of vaccination, but does have a 72-hour test or a rapid test, are Julia, Michael, are you accepting that as an alternative? And what's been your experience with that? And do you accept one, but not the other? Because I heard Richard say some questions about the rapid tests. There seem to be fewer questions about the 72-hour tests. And of course, the reason I ask is because I represent Sacramento Philharmonic and Opera. We have our first performance on September the 10th. We'll have a big audience because it'll be at Memorial. And this issue is one that we've got to resolve quickly because our musicians are insisting that audience members have to have either proof of vaccination, not a rapid test, but a 72-hour test. So, Julia, I heard you say that you won't pay for those tests, and I fully get that, but will you accept one of the other tests in lieu of having proof of vaccination? Same to Michael, and same question to anybody on the phone call here or on the Zoom call who has had performances and had experience already.
Yeah, so we definitely talked about one or the other, but we ultimately decided to go with proof of full vaccination only and not do the negative test thing. And it just came down to, we felt that 72 hours was too large of a window. And we don't know where someone has been in the 72 hours since they got tested. Sometimes it's not going to come back as positive, and then 24 hours later it will. And we just felt like it was the safest thing we could do for the people who are going to be in our building.
Yeah, same. Broadway League kind of created that standard of the vaccine or the COVID-19 test. We followed their lead for a while, but our board members got concerned, and we also did it to raise the confidence of other people attending the event as part of it. So we don't do either of those tests. We just do proof of vaccine.
Mhm.
So it's 100% proof of vaccine. Okay.
Sounds like it. Sounds like it. Okay, so one other sort of question that, and if I didn't miss anything, I know Don, if you can just kind of check the chat for me. Actually, one more. Let's see here. Any forecast on the viability of outdoor events in terms of gathering size restrictions, early fall timeframe? Anybody else hear anything? I mean, I can certainly look into that from my side of things, but.
I think Laura and Richard have some information about some of that when
we pivot over. Okay.
When we
I see
pivot
I've used it. That's the second time I've used it. I haven't used it in months. And
we need a swear jar for the word pivot. So if it comes up again today, we'll just start putting quarters aside.
All right. So one last kind of question set for all of you, which is messaging and communications. So how are you doing it? Where are you putting it ahead of all of this, to kind of communicate this before people get there? Let's start with that one. And then I've got another question for you about how it could be helpful if we had some external support to get the messaging out.
I'll go. We just did this week a mass mailing to our constant contact list and spelled out, hey, updated advisory, our policies have changed, and we are encouraging people to come back and check, because I imagine it'll change several times over the course of the next 6 months. But we just put that as a top line item all by itself. There's signage at the theater as well. And we had to do it pretty quickly. So we did that on Monday or maybe last Friday, and we had our first invited address on Tuesday. I was surprised at how much support there was for it, actually. All the emails we've received have been positive, and thank you for tightening down. I know it was a tough decision. And we haven't had problems yet, but we haven't had a huge number of performances either. So it wouldn't surprise me if it happens.
Anyone else?
We're phasing it in because we haven't had our first really big event yet. So we're trying to kind of figure out how to jump into that without creating a bunch of preliminary headaches for ourselves. But we have been instituting vaccine policies with our classes. And initially we were gonna do vaccine or test and then phase that out and eventually go all vaccine. And we didn't even need to do that. We lost one class because the teacher refused to she's not vaccinated, and she told us she's not going to get vaccinated. So that class didn't get rescheduled, it got canceled. But everybody's been really super positive, and all of our drop-in studios have actually been at the maximum capacity that we can support since we did it. We haven't gotten any complaints. So that's really encouraging. And actually the responses we have had have been very, very positive, and people feeling like they really appreciate it. So we haven't announced the public program piece of this yet, just because we want to have our messaging really dialed before we do that. So, but I think maybe also just consistency. I know somebody else on the call said consistency amongst our organizations, if there's some tenets that we can agree on. And I feel like if there's vaccination policies even amongst our teams. There's places where we can try to provide solidarity to each other to just encourage more people to get vaccinated, making sure our staff is vaccinated. Things like that could be really helpful.
That's great. So one other question, and then I want to pivot. No, I want to move to Laura and Richard. Where do you think some of that external support? I mean, I've had some good conversations with some folks in the community news outlets that are certainly eager to support reopening and make sure that you all have what you need. How could they be most helpful at this point? Or not at all?
Megan, I was going to mention earlier quickly that, we've done a lot, not a lot, but we've done some youth or not even youth, middle school, high school. We were helping out a lot with sporting tournaments this summer. And we found as things went on and got worse towards this, towards the end of the summer, that huge amounts of communication was, just large amounts of communication, was really, really important. That as soon as you can get it out, that this is what's going to happen, this is what we're about, post it on any social you have. I was talking to Liv about this, like even, Open Table has it on, if you make a reservation, they require blah, blah, so it's everywhere, so that the surprises are the problem, usually is what we found.
Mhm.
And so nobody likes to be surprised. And we found that if we were really aggressive with our communication in all forms, it was really helpful.
Well, that's really great. Don, I have a question for you. What's going on in Austin? Are there any sort of general campaigns that the arts groups are doing together around this? What do you see there?
Yeah, there's actually, there's several good campaigns. I was going to send you examples of a couple, because one of the crowd psychologists that some of our guys have been talking to, and branding and so forth, that it really instead of being more restrictive in the rules, it's more just getting creative about more of the positive for your safety. That made some switch, but there's been some. I was on a reps call earlier today, and there were some examples, and I think one of the things we're going to do is get from other cities to start sharing messaging that it's actually works and it's better received than mask required or vaccine proof. Just like the whole thing about vaccination. Early on, the vaccine passport had a negative, reaction, and then vaccine verification didn't. So I think words matter, and especially in the messaging here, it's going to make a difference for most of the folks.
Can you give an example of how they're switching that? Anybody talk about that on the reps call? Because I know there's people from all over the country.
Not as much as they spent more on the mental health stuff with the creative community, but which is equally important. But not as much on the campaign specific. I think people were going to follow up, because I think one of the things that I'm hearing tonight also is consistent across the other cities, is there just needs to be solidarity, and kind of, I think to Liv's comment earlier mentioned about using here's the pillars that we all agree upon, and then you can add, if a certain venue wants to add another layer of protection for their patrons, then they can. That's kind of how it's been messaging in the venues in Austin. And of course, we're in a state that the governor's made it illegal to even require proof of vaccination. So.
Thanks. Yeah. All right. Well, we just wanted to start kind of surface some stuff from all of you. And the objective is to really start to take some of these, because it's clear there's some things that you're all kind of doing consistently, and we'll put that down on paper and kind of share that out with folks, share some resources to the extent that we can, and then just going to make this conversation available for other folks who weren't able to attend today. So that was kind of the first part of the conversation. And I think, Don makes a great point for many in the creative community really struggling as much as, mentally and dealing with issues associated with all of this and the uncertainty and the exhaustion and really wanting to be able to come back, but then, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back kind of thing. So, Liv had the connection with the folks from Sierra Health, and it sounded like when we were talking ahead of time, they had some really great resources for you. So we wanted to be able to put that front and center in the conversation. So can I lean to you, Laura and Richard, and take it from there?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you all very much for inviting us. Laura, are you able to share your screen?
I am. Hold on just
Yay.
a minute.
So while Laura's getting that up, I'll kind of get us started with, one of the things that we're gonna present today is I'm gonna do very briefly just an introduction to how we got to where we are today in the work that we're doing. And it is no mystery to any of you that if there's a consistency within the pandemic, it's that we're constantly changing. And the realities of moving from the very beginning of the work that we started with to where we are today has shifted dramatically. It has not pivoted, it has shifted dramatically. So in the frame that we're going to talk about, I'm going to do a little bit of background for you to kind of get you to where we are. Then Laura's going to take it from there and really push on some of the vaccination work that's happening. She's going to give you some really crummy stats, so be prepared for that. Laura, you want to go to the next slide? So we are the Sacramento CoLab in a large program. It was formed back in July. I'm losing track of my years already. July 2020. I'm going to say that Sierra Health Foundation jumped in really quickly when the pandemic started. So before the CoLab started, we worked closely with Mayor Steinberg, Councilmember Chenier, and many of our business partners to create the Donate for Sacramento program. We ended up reaching about $1.7 million that was pushed back out into COVID relief work. A lot of small business support, a lot of PPE, and really assistance with getting everybody what they need to be able to survive. What we hoping was not going to be a 18-month longer process, but was really going to be about 6 months. When we got to the summertime, we recognized that wasn't the case. And we really did change from the concept of immediate relief to what are we going to need to do over the course of a year to support people and to support our communities. So we formed the Sacramento CoLab, which was started with Sacramento County in partnership with Sacramento County. And the initial piece was really around building our business infrastructure, continuing our business infrastructure, and supporting the contact tracing work, which was really designed to mitigate the spread of the COVID virus. Now you can go, Laura. Thanks. So, the bulk of our work initially was really around contact tracing and business navigator work. The business navigators and contact tracers were both programs in which we contracted with local community-based organizations. They would then hire the community members to be able to get trained and do the work themselves in partnership with the navigators. It was in partnership with the local ethnic community chambers, and with the contact tracers, it was in partnership with Sacramento County, and Laura actually ran that program. Our ultimate goal became really a change to immediate relief services, and then how do we create a vaccination model that can be successful in Sacramento? And just to, going to say something out loud that I'm certain all of you have either felt or recognized or just know, but Sacramento County has traditionally not funded its community organizations very well, and arts included, right? And as a result of that, when the pandemic hit, we didn't have an infrastructure in place to be able to support our communities of color, our diverse communities, our LGBTQ communities. We didn't have any of that. And so this collab was something that was created to actually form a model and a coalition that could be used to work in partnership with health institutions, with public health, and other organizations to be able to get relief to folks and be able to support the work that was needed around now reopening. Our business navigator work in particular was about how to provide the necessary information to keep businesses in an open, safe environment. And if they weren't able to stay open, how to actually maintain their business long-term and then connect them with all the necessary financial opportunities that were available. So that was really key. The residential pieces were really about food, mental health, around making sure that financial assistance was provided and that our community partners could play a lead role in reaching the people who they already intuitively are in touch with and get them the support they need immediately. Laura, you want to go to the next slide? So timeline wise, I'm going to point to a couple of key areas. September actually shifted for us in that the county and us went into a larger partnership. It allowed us to introduce over 38 partners, community partners into this program. They all were able to hire folks, able to begin to do a train. This was not, it started off as the concept of it being a short term and we turned it into a full year. And now we're actually recontracting with everybody for another year. So it's going to be a full, in the end, it's going to end up being a full 2 years program so that it's not about a short term, hey, come in and do this. It's folks who are working in this program have longevity and have, we're paying well. We're making sure folks are being paid well. Over the course of a year, we've been able to provide over $5 million, $5,200,000 in financial assistance. We did that through partnerships with United Way and Asian Resources. They actually provided the background work to be able to do all the checks and everything and get people cash. So this wasn't just rent. This was, we recognized people needed cash in the moment. We're able to provide over 148,000 meals. We did that through multiple partnerships, but one big one was the family meal program, in which we contracted with multiple restaurants run by Clay Nutting of Cannon and Patrick Mulvaney. They were the two leads, but they contracted then with over 21 restaurants throughout Sacramento County to be able to make sure that folks were getting food. Our community-based organizations would identify people in need, put them in the system, they would get the food out to them. It's really, really amazing. And it kept businesses open because it's money going to the restaurants to support their workers. Over 7,400 small businesses were reached, provided necessary equipment or resources. I mentioned before, we have 13 testing sites that have since opened. I think for us, the biggest thing that's come around is we're really now honing in on the vaccination work. We started that up in February, knowing it's coming. We've been building towards it, but now we're in the process of building a true community infrastructure for this. With Laura's going to talk about the vaccine ambassadors and influencer program, and really a way to make sure that we're getting the word out. I'll say one more piece before I pass it over to Laura, because the background piece is important, is that we had 9 different media groups that reached different ages and ethnicities and demographics throughout Sacramento that we contracted with for messaging across the board. And I heard you all talking about messaging and how to get the word out and how to do it right. And it's one of the things we're doing internally as well, really working with our communications team to figure out exactly what the right way to do this is. I will not lie, we get just as much, I heard some of you talk about how people have been generally nice. We get a lot of hate mail, we get a lot of hate messages and a lot of mean things thrown at us. But we also know, just like all of you, that in the end, it's the smaller population that's putting that out there. And it's really about making sure, for us, it's about making sure that we're reaching the most folks we can to support them in being healthy moving forward. And for us, health equals a vaccination. The only way we're going to really curb this is through the vaccination, and we're really pushing, obviously, for folks to be vaccinated. It is great to hear that the model most of you are really pushing towards is how to make sure your customers and your workers are safe, because that's one of the things that I think moving forward, I don't remember who said it, but moving forward, we need to really be working in partnership with Public Health Department, Sacramento County, to be able to put out these broad messages and mandates in some cases, so that it's really not incumbent on just the business to be the enforcer, but it's really coming from a public health place. That's probably one of the core points that I think that together we could walk away from this and walk to some of the folks to make sure that we push that. Laura, if you want to go to the next slide, I'm going to pass it to you to talk about the mental health work and then the vaccination work.
Great. Thanks, Richard. Let's see if I can, okay. And I'm like, thanks, Rick. And now it's not moving. Oh no.
You need me to fill in? Just kidding.
Hold on. That's really odd.
Why don't you unshare and then reshare?
Here we go.
There you
Okay.
go.
Okay, so I'm just going to jump to what we're doing now. So I know I talked to Liv about this for resources. So just so you know, folks who are have tested positive for COVID, who are either in isolation or quarantine. So that means also folks who have been a close contact that need to quarantine, that we do offer these resources to them for the entire time that they're in isolation or quarantine. So we have prepared food, just like Richard mentioned, the meals program, which is 2 weeks of meals from all those stellar restaurants. We have groceries from Raley's. We have food boxes from the Sacramento Food Bank, pregnancy services, healthcare insurance referrals, CalFresh referrals, and then the mental health services. So the mental health services are a little bit separate. I'll go into that right now, because those are actually for anybody. So, and I can't believe that my lawn guy is here now blowing the leaves. So anyway, so the mental health is for anybody who's been impacted by COVID. So what I'm saying is you do not have to have COVID or be in isolation or quarantine. It's for anybody. And we've all been impacted by COVID. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So the mental health right now is through hearyou.org. And I can send over to Liv so she can send it out. There is a referral form. It's very easy. You can actually hook up, you can determine who you want to speak with, whether it's by ethnicity, by gender. You get 6 free visits right now. And we also have some really great other resources here that I'll send forward to Liv as well. We had some really great webinars over the last year. We've got some, they've all been taped. We had just some really wonderful stuff, plus free counseling. So the Vaccine Ambassador Program, like Richard said, we are just starting. Right now, the purpose of the Ambassador Program, we have actually run 4 influencer programs. We call them Influencers First. They're 2-hour programs. But really what the programs talk about are learning more about COVID-19 and the latest updates on the vaccine, gain the knowledge and skills to provide key messages addressing concerns about the vaccine, and provide you with communication tools to have those effective conversations, and why this is really important. Because right now it's coming down to us. It's coming down to those one-on-one conversations. And so this 2-hour training will give you those skills to do that work. And that's open to anybody as well. You know, I wanted to just give you guys some numbers, if you don't know the numbers already, about our cases in Sacramento. It's really, actually, the number today is 130,000 cases. And they're saying roughly we're going about 500 cases a day, and that they think that we're not peaking yet. That was the latest thing I heard, that the peak looks like it might be mid-September. If you can see on the graph here, I did put, I've got the screen thing here in front, so you can't really see it too well if you can't see it. But in November 25th of 2020, we had 679 cases. I don't know if you guys remember when things started taking off. It was right after Halloween. And that 2 weeks after Halloween, we really started going up. Now you look at August 16th and we had 646 cases. So we're actually, you know, at this point in time last year in August, we're much, much higher. And when you think about it, we're half vaccinated. So if you can imagine if we didn't have the vaccine last summer, what this would look like. So it's the Delta variant is a real thing. We actually have right now around 400 hospitalizations of folks with COVID. And as you know, they are hitting the younger population. So who's vaccinated? In California, we have 64% roughly that are fully vaccinated. I'm just going to run through these quickly. And in Sacramento County, we're lagging behind at almost 50%. So this is the influencer training I wanted to show you guys. The next one is September 1st. It's open to anybody. And you're going to learn all the things that I just showed you with this influencer training. It's really fantastic. We have some fabulous providers from Kaiser Permanente that speak at these trainings and answer all your questions. I could show you the whole deck, but it's really interesting. There's a lot of misconceptions that they answer, so that I really think this would be a great opportunity for you and your staff to attend, so that you do have that information if you do want to have those conversations. And we would welcome you there for sure. We've had 4 of those so far. We had one for the Latin X community, and it was all in Spanish. We have a recording of that one, and we had one for the African American community last week. And those are all available. So that was it. So the ambassador program, we're hoping to get lots of influencers. There's actually further training to even become a kind of a lead in the vaccine ambassador program, but we are working really hard to disseminate this information and have everybody be an influencer. And we would love to partner with you if there's anything that you need from me or any more information about the program. We're here.
Just a quick minute. Quick note. It's the influencer training is free to anybody, and anybody can register. So it's not it's not something that you have to pay for or anything like that.
That's great. And one of the things that we were talking about before as we sort of look to the future, I've in the previous life done a lot of work looking at the intersection of arts and health. And part of that, just because of where it was in Cleveland, the Cleveland Clinic, the healthcare scene is big and the art scene is big. And I want to share that just recently, the Centers for Disease Control, in partnership with the Center for Arts and Medicine out of the University of Florida, released a repository focused specifically on the role of the arts in dealing with vaccine hesitancy. And so there's some really great examples of the use of the arts to be able to address some of these things. And so to the extent that, so I shared that directly. I've been in conversation with the county. I'm like, hey folks, like obviously our people have a vested interest in what's going on here, because the sooner we get, the sooner the healthier our field is going to be as well. So to the extent that we can deploy creative vehicles for getting some of this messaging out, if we know who the targets are, if we know who the potential to be able to deploy that. So shared some of that. There's definitely some interest, I think, in that moving forward. Obviously, resources and figuring out what that looks like. But we had a really great example very early on, funded through the CARES grants with the Latino Center and the Artist Corps, and really doing some messaging at that stage, in an earlier stage of the pandemic. And so to the extent that we can figure that out, how we might be able to be helpful, I think that number one helps us, helps everybody. And it helps people just really see or realize a better understanding, a bigger understanding of what the role of the arts are in our lives and in our communities. So we're going to share that out too. I know that CDC just did a webinar on that. I wasn't able to attend. I think it was yesterday or the day before, but I think we can share some of those resources and information. And I know that the county is interested in another conversation, and we'll be sharing some information as they put
put their program together with all of you. So I hope you'll step up, share. But when we talked to them, they said, great, get the information from this initial conversation and then feed that back to us. And that can inform future conversation with the field. So I think lots of opportunity for partnership, and certainly, you know, the creative community, there's a lot we have to offer around this. So to the extent that you all can take that training or get the message, then thinking about, okay, so how do you translate that through creative vehicles to help move the needle? So Liv, just back to you.
Yeah, I had a quick question for Richard and Laura. Well, two actually. One, somebody asked where they can find information about the September 1st training. So, and we could push something out on all of our social media channels after this too, to share that event. But then, you know, I think, like Megan mentioned, there's a lot of us that really want to be team players in this and to help with this effort, because the lack of vaccination and the public health crisis is obviously impacting the livelihoods of everything that we all do, and will become increasingly life or death as this continues to go on. So what would be helpful to you all, you know, if there was some initiative or something that we decided to take as a group, what would you see being one of the most effective things that we could do?
You know, the reality is that that's a great, thank you. First, that's like a wonderful question, because it's almost implying that you're excited to do something. So that's that as a group. So that's exciting for us. One of the things that we have recognized is that the folks who are unvaccinated, originally we thought you could pin them into certain categories, but the reality is that it's across the board in many different places. It is definitely, you know, Laura didn't show some of these, but, you know, within the African American community, only, was it, Laura, just under 29% of the African American community in Sacramento is vaccinated. Is that correct?
28, yeah, 28.9%.
So, you know, and you're talking about so it's specific populations of groups that are missing from our vaccination efforts. And as we start to think about how it is the arts and theater and you know, your groups have been so key in reaching multiple communities for so long, that I think it would be really crucial to be able to create messaging together. And it'd also be really crucial to establish, statements together about how important it is for our communities. And I think those are the kind of things that we're really, when we talk to our community partners, when we talk to our communications folks, they're really looking for this sort of, large coalition and gathering of folks that can come together and say, no, this is right for all of us. We need to do it. So I think messaging would be huge in the how we, and as one core piece. Second is, I really believe that there is a reality that we need to influence the policymakers in establishing guidelines that support our businesses and our well-being, and don't make the businesses the victims and or the villains. And so I really think that coalitions coming together, and I do know that I've been in contact with multiple chambers who are really interested in pushing this forward as well. So it's something that maybe the group could come together as an influencer in that as well, would be key. And lastly, your employees are huge connectors, and they are folks who are in many different groups and populations. And if they're taking the influencer training, then it only gets them out there more and more, and being able to understand what the vaccines are about, how to communicate with people, how to frame it in ways that are constructive as opposed to criticizing. Yeah. Laura, did you have any? I stole like 3 big things. Laura, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Actually, I was looking for the link, you guys. It's embedded in the flyer. So I think the best thing, I don't want to send out the wrong link in the chat for this upcoming, that's what I was doing actually. I don't have anything to add. I can answer Alexandra's question here, though, in the chat, that all of this information is completely addressed in these influencer trainings. They're really great. They're going to talk about all about that, and I think you find them super helpful. And there's a huge Q&A session with the doctors, so that's really nice. So you can have specific. But you guys are a big bro. Yes, I agree with you on that, Richard. It would be, the messaging would be, I know you could teach us something too, actually, which would be wonderful. We could work together on that.
Julia, I saw your hand went up when we were talking.
Yeah, so the influencer training is amazing. First of all, thank you guys for offering that. But yeah, so one of the things I've been thinking about kind of as this conversation is happening is a few weeks ago, a bunch of the restaurants and bars in San Francisco kind of came together, put out this letter saying we're all on board with, I don't remember if it was strict vaccination policy or vaccinated or a negative test, but just like hundreds of businesses signed on to this letter and this pledge basically to follow these rules. And they pushed these letters out on their social media. They all showed a united front that they were all aligned with this. And then shortly thereafter, the city kind of made their own policy. And so I'm wondering if there is initiative within this group to kind of put together a letter like that or some kind of pledge like that. I know a lot of us have already kind of put together our own policies internally, but if there was some kind of baseline that we could all agree on, and if we wanted to go stricter than that, we could, but just as a way to show a united front, I think that we have a lot of really influential people and organizations represented in this room right now.
I'll just add that, you know, one of my work with the Sierra Health Foundation didn't start as vaccine and COVID relief, right? It actually started with community organizing, community development, and advocacy work. And the best way to do advocacy work is to come in as a large coalition, many voices, same message, same you know, areas that you're addressing. It will get impact. And I know that, for example, with the relief funds that the county is discussing right now, we had 78 community partners that signed a letter indicating exactly what categories they wanted, and they have not shied away from those categories yet. So, you know, power in numbers and in voice together. So I guess, Julie, what I'm saying is, yes, do it, go.
I'm down.
Well, and I know that part of what we were going to do for you and just support and give it back to you, because you can, you know, Sarah can decide how it wants to approach organizing, you know, within the creative community around this. But, you know, we can put all of this stuff down. And the idea was to actually build a document that could be a starting point for other discussions. So certainly that's why Don's been listening in and I've been sort of facilitating in this way. So, you know, whatever you guys decide to do and support, and then, you know, in our ongoing conversations with the county, directly, there's an opportunity there. So
I think if we could get help developing a toolkit, that would be really cool. And then that way each of us is pushing out consistent information. So if we have a message that we share to our guests about vaccination, because I also think for some of us that are really bandwidth constrained, doing this and doing it right is kind of another, you know, sort of overwhelming thing to confront in the present moment. And so just having those, kind of similar to what we did with the advocacy earlier this week with the $10 million and giving people copy paste text that they could put in e-comment and things like that, so that they don't, you know, if they wanted to participate, they didn't have to think about it, would be great. And then I'm curious, Alpha Bruton, Alpha, I hope I pronounced your last name right, is asking about a self-certification that the city of Chicago is doing. And I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if you are, Dawn, with some of the national stuff you've been doing, but he's asking if Sacramento has something similar.
Not that I'm aware of, but
I was just
that's
He is
social,
asking, yes.
that's so Chicago. I'm familiar with that self-certification, and it's just, I'm not a fan of it because it's self-certification. So
Yeah, well, we self-certified our gallery here because we're in an art district, and there was uniform posting of the signature. I mean, that says that we are, certified with the city, that we went through all of these steps. And then we also, with that messaging is on our website. Our messaging is on the brands that we send out, or info that we send out. And then we have all the steps that people need to go through to be able to come into our venue. And of course, we have the hybrid that's going on with people being outdoors because we have a large venue and an outdoor space. But you are right, when people start that drinking, with the bars being open, and because we're a gallery that has a liquor license and permit, and it doubles as an event space, so people start removing the mask. But we have the mask mandate went in effect on Friday, the 20th, this weekend. So people were adhering to that, and they were also coming in with the wristbands. If they were vaccinated, it's their choice to keep the mask on or, take it off. Especially when they're outdoors in the activated space. But I felt that the self-certification worked, because we really pushed the branding of that.
I think the messaging and the branding part for that, it's just I've spent a lot of time with the city of Chicago folks, and so if no one is following up and making sure that people are fulfilling their commitment, I think that's where I think the gaps are. So
I can just say I did have some of our vaccine ambassadors take that training just to see what they thought. And they thought it was fine for sure. They thought they went over some good points, but having the in-person, I think, influencer training is very, very helpful because there is so much, this whole pandemic is so fluid, and there's so many new questions that come up actually even week to week. That's really appropriate for what's happening right now. So I think those in combination, I think would be a really, there's actually also one other amazing training through UCSF right now that is like a vaccine communication training. And that's where we'll send our lead people, because that's really where there's actual role playing, and you talk about how to have those conversations and things like that. But I'd be happy to share if you guys wanted to do some lead work. Yeah, it's so funny how we talk about live as being this, which isn't really live. It's not even being in person, but yeah, the live Q&A and the I'll tell you, the most beautiful thing I watched was that Spanish language vaccine ambassador program, because I speak a little Spanish, but I could not, we have translators too, by the way. Oh, that's one thing I wanted to mention. We have translators, I think, Richard, in 9 different languages or 10 or something like that for the ambassador training coming up. So anybody in it's all the major languages that we have here in Sacramento, there will be a translator for the influencer training. But seeing just folks in their language talking to the doctor about what's going on and all their fears and all the misconceptions in the Latinx community, it was really just a really dynamic dialogue. And a lot of people went out and got vaccinated and made sure their mom went and got that, things like that. A lot of stuff came out of that one. It was really good.
And I used my Google skills to actually find our vaccination flyer. And
you did find it. Oh,
so it's terrible of us not to have actually known where it was. And then not shockingly, it was on our collab website. So I posted the link to that as well. There's a lot of other resources available in there too.
I'm a big resource for you as well, right? I mean, both Richard and I, but we're helping out, Los Rios community colleges put together their influencer training for their staff, because they are mandating all their students and all their staff be vaccinated. And it's a big, that they're they're trying to get all their, as much as information that they can, so they can have those conversations for folks who really are not quite sure.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what Laura said, and that's that, we are here for all of you as well. This is a partnership. We don't think of this as just a presentation we're doing, but we think of this as walking in the door to become, further our work together and to be partners moving forward. So however we can help.
That's great. So clearly lots of stuff to aggregate from today, lots of resources to be able to both share out, videos to share out, all of that, some conversations maybe to have about how you all want to move forward with your own, with the creative community, with your advocacy to various outlets and engage around some of these topics. So Liv, did you get to everything you wanted to get to today?
I think so. I copied all of the chat so we can follow up with the questions people had and the resources they were looking for after this. And I'm really happy that we were able to pull this together today because it's just really fantastic. And so, yeah, thanks to the Office of Arts and Culture, and thank you very much to the Sierra Health Foundation. And there's a couple people who've jumped off the call, but I just wanted to follow up and say that some of the mental health resources that are available right now, I know several of our colleagues are really struggling with having to transition all of their programs yet again. And so I think that's a pretty amazing resource that I think could also be utilized for things like that. So yeah, I think more information is better. And I'm also going to talk to our staff to see who can participate in the influencer training on September 1st. So thanks so much, everybody. I think this is great.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, and kudos to Sarah again for organizing.
Yay!
Yes.
Cool. All right.
So that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Have a good night, everybody.